My name is Quinn Dawson. I'm 34 years old, currently living and working in Austin, Texas. That day, during my sister's engagement party, while everyone was raising glasses, laughing under warm, golden lights, I was quietly pouring wine for guests. Not because I wanted to, but because my mother said, "You're not great with people. Helping behind the scenes suits you better." Then Alyssa, my sister, burst out laughing and clearly announced in front of over 80 people, "This is Quinn, my sister. The family joke is she's our walking shadow." The whole room erupted in laughter, but right at that moment, a man stepped forward, shook my hand, and said, "You're Quinn? We need to talk." Have you ever had your own family turn you into a joke in front of a crowd? Leave a comment below, hit like and subscribe if this story touches something deep inside you, because everything that happened after that night changed everything. I grew up in a faded beige house on the outskirts of Wimberley, where neighbors used to call our family picture perfect. My mom was a high school music teacher, and my dad ran a small auto repair shop. We weren't wealthy, but we had enough, and we always looked put together on the outside. I was the oldest, a position that's supposed to matter, but in our house, being the oldest meant being responsible, setting the example, and never being allowed to make mistakes. When I was 7, I accidentally broke Mom's favorite glass vase while playing. Alyssa, who was 4 at the time, was standing right next to me, still holding the ball. My mom looked at us, said nothing, dragged me into the kitchen, and made me stand facing the wall for an hour. I said it wasn't me, it was Alyssa. She simply replied, "You're the big sister. You should have taught her better." So I learned to take the blame, even when it wasn't mine. Elisa was different. She had Dad's bright blue eyes and naturally curly blonde hair that made everyone want to pat her head. Every time she walked into a room, people lit up. They called her the Dawson Angel, the town's little princess, Mom's pride. I heard those words throughout my teenage years. Sometimes I wanted to ask, then what am I? But I never did. I started reading early. Maybe it was my way of carving out a place in that small world. I did well in school, made the state academic team, won a full-ride scholarship to college. But those achievements always faded behind one familiar family phrase. "That's just Quinn. Diligent, practical, never a worry." It sounded like praise, but it felt more like a label. "She's fine. No need to pay attention." While I juggled exams and worked late shifts at the library to afford rent and food, Elisa was posting prom dresses and party photos, getting care packages from Mom just because she's too skinny. I didn't envy what she had, but I used to wish, just once, that Mom would ask if I had enough to eat or if I was okay working late and getting up before sunrise. I remember my 21st birthday. I didn't go home because even if I had, the party would have been another stage for Mom to talk about Alyssa being picked as MC for some campus event or how she was dating a guy from a good family. As for me, I'd get exactly 2 questions: how's work? And when are you planning to find someone serious? When Alyssa was in her senior year, I had just started working at a tech firm in Austin as a product development consultant. I called Mom, proud to share that I'd been nominated for an internal award just 6 months into the job. She said, "That's great. But you know what? Alyssa was just picked to give the graduation speech. They say her voice is so inspiring." I said nothing. I'd learned to swallow my joy knowing it didn't shine bright enough to be noticed in our family. My family wasn't cruel. I knew that. They didn't hit or yell, but they forgot me. They overlooked me like people passing by a sign that doesn't catch the eye. When my sister started dating Tyler, a tall, polished banker from the Green family who looked like he stepped out of a TV show, our house came alive again. Alyssa was no longer just the sweet town girl. She was soon to be Mrs. Green. The whole family buzzed with talk of invitations, bridesmaid dresses, cakes. At gatherings, I sat beside them, quiet, like a shadow. Once, I tried suggesting a venue for the wedding. I'd worked on a project for a major events restaurant chain in Austin, so I had some insight. But Mom brushed it off, gently. "Sweetie, that's not really your field. Let Alyssa decide." Dad just chuckled and patted my shoulder like a robot. That's my girl. Great with logic and tech stuff. Emotions, better leave those to your sister. I didn't feel hurt anymore. I'd gotten used to being left out of anything involving feelings. Even though I was the one who remembered everyone's birthdays, who wrapped Christmas gifts for mom, who drove 3 hours just to attend a cousin's baby shower. But none of that had sparkle. None of it stuck in people's minds. And then came the engagement party. When Alyssa raised her glass and called me a walking shadow, I saw the whole room laugh and clap like it was perfectly normal. I didn't cry. I simply set my wine glass down and walked to a corner of the hall to collect myself. And that's when he walked over. The groom's father, Richard Green, a tall man with salt and pepper hair, dressed in a simple gray suit but with a presence you couldn't miss. He extended his hand, looked me straight in the eye, and said, "You're Quinn Dawson?" I nodded, speechless. Then he smiled. "3 different people have mentioned you in the past 3 weeks. I think we need to have a conversation. Soon?" For the first time in a long while, I felt seen, not as Elise's sister, but as me, Quinn, the person standing there, not a shadow, a person of value. I stood for a moment at the edge of the hall, still holding my glass, untouched. In front of me were relatives, old neighbors, people who had watched me grow up, yet no one came over. They passed by, smiled politely, then returned to their conversations about Alyssa's dress, flowers, cake, guest list. I'd prepared myself for this, but it still stung to realize I was a stranger at my own family's party. I walked over to the gift table and gently placed down the box I'd wrapped in ivory silk paper, topped with a handwritten note. Inside was a limited edition Tiffany & Co. crystal glass set I'd spent a week tracking down, not because it was expensive, but because I remembered Elisa admiring it when we passed by the store in New York. I hoped she'd realize I cared. As I turned, I saw Mom standing with 2 older women, probably her book club friends. I slowly walked over to greet them, but before I could say anything, Mom said quickly, "This is Quinn, Alyssa's sister. She lives in Austin, works with computers or something, I don't really know. Some high-tech thing I don't understand." The women smiled and one asked, "Oh, like a hacker?" I gave a polite laugh. "Not exactly. I'm a strategy consultant for small businesses, helping them implement technology systems that match their operations." That answer made them pause for a second. But Mom had already turned to continue her story about Elisa's weekend wedding dress fitting. I quietly stepped away, back to the bar. I was about to order another drink when I heard a calm, deep voice beside me. "You're Quinn Dawson, aren't you?" I turned, surprised to see Mr. Richard Green again. He was tall, his face weathered but sharp-eyed. I nodded. "Yes, I am." He shook my hand with a firm grip. "Richard Green, I've heard a lot about you." I smiled politely. "Hopefully good things?" He nodded. "More than good. I heard you've been consulting for small businesses and tech." I was slightly taken aback. I immediately wondered, who told him? But I answered, "Yes, I mostly work with small to mid-sized companies struggling with digital transformation. A lot of it involves operations and data systems." Richard raised an interested eyebrow. "That's fascinating. I sit on the advisory board for a business development fund here in Texas. For months now, we've been struggling to find the right person to lead our digital transformation task force. I heard how you handled the Crestwood auto system, smart and grounded." I was a little confused. No one in the family had ever asked what I did at Crestwood. Even when I posted about the project on social media, my mother only responded with a thumbs-up emoji. But he, a man I had just met, brought it up like it was something of value. "Thank you for noticing," I said. "Crestwood was a tough but memorable project. I enjoy working with teams that are determined to create change." Richard reached into his suit pocket and pulled out a business card, offering it to me. "I don't want to interrupt your evening, but if you have time, I'd like to invite you to lunch next week. I think we might be able to build something valuable together." I glanced at the card. Thick stock, deeply embossed, Richard L. Green, partner, Founders Circle Ventures. I'd heard of the fund before, a firm investing in socially impactful business initiatives across the southern U.S. It's an honor, I replied, cautious but unable to hide the excitement that slipped into my voice. I'll be in touch soon. He nodded. I'm looking forward to that meeting, Quinn. I stood still for a moment after he walked away, the card still in my hand. No one at the party noticed the conversation. My family continued to orbit around Alyssa like planets around a sun. But for me, just minutes earlier, a door had opened quietly and powerfully, like people often describe real opportunities. I looked toward my sister, beaming beside Tyler, then down at the wine glass in my hand. This time, I drank it all, not to forget, but to prepare for what lay ahead. 3 days after the engagement party, I stepped into the restaurant Richard had chosen for our meeting, a classic venue in downtown Austin with high ceilings, dark wood, and warm amber lights. No noise, no flash. Just stepping inside made me feel grounded. I arrived 10 minutes early out of habit. Richard came right on time. He shook my hand with the steady gaze of someone who meets hundreds of people a year, but with a quiet warmth that didn't feel like business formality. Thank you for making the time, he said. I know you're busy, so I'll get straight to the point. I need someone like you, direct, detail-oriented, and someone who understands how businesses operate when resources are tight. We ordered simple dishes, salad, soup, and coffee, no wine. The conversation quickly moved past introductions into specific scenarios. The company I want you to work with is called Kingswell Furniture, he said. They were once a beloved family-run workshop, well supported by the local community, but over the past few years, supply chain disruptions and outdated management practices have dragged them down. They have the quality and the craftsmanship, but they can't keep up with the market anymore. I nodded and jotted a few notes in my notebook. Have they tried implementing any coordination software? SAP or NetSuite? Mid-level scale? They bought a system 3 years ago, but no one knows how to use it effectively, he said. The biggest issue is they lack someone to bridge the gap between operations and the tech teams. I think you could be that person. I looked up. You're thinking of me as an independent strategic consultant? Exactly. You won't report directly to their leadership. You'll be working under me, but have full access to operational data. Timeframe, 8 weeks. Goal, assess, recommend, and assist with phase 1 implementation if viable. I didn't answer right away. Richard smiled. I don't need your decision today. I just want you to know I'm serious. You're not a backup plan. You're my first choice. I left that meeting feeling a strange mix of excitement and apprehension. It was the kind of opportunity I'd been waiting for, but I also knew it would come with fallout, especially from my family. And I was right. 3 days after I accepted the role with Kingswell, my mother called. What are you doing, Quinn? Her tone was sharp from the start. I just wrapped a meeting, I replied, leaning back in my office chair. Why, what's going on? Rachel told me that Tyler's father, Richard Green, is telling everyone you're some rising star in the tech world. Do you know what people are saying at church? They all think you're the one getting married. I let out a soft laugh, unable to believe what I was hearing. It's just a consulting contract, Mom. And if Richard said anything, it's probably because he respects my work. Don't you think the timing is a little sensitive? She asked carefully. Your sister is getting married soon, and now you're diving into something that could cause confusion. Do you always have to pick the most awkward moment? I gripped my phone tighter. What do you want me to do? Turn down this opportunity? Sit quietly so Alyssa can shine while I disappear on cue? Don't say that, Quinn. I just think maybe you could wait until after the wedding, once everything has settled. Rachel's under a lot of stress. I'm under a lot of stress too, Mom. Do you know that? I said, my voice no longer soft. I work 10 hours a day. I've never asked anyone for applause, but at the very least, don't treat my success like it's something shameful. You're misunderstanding. No, I'm not. It's always wait until after her big event. Don't disrupt the atmosphere. Let Alyssa be the center of attention. And what about me? Have I ever been allowed to be the center? There was silence on the other end for a long time. Then my mother exhaled slowly. I don't want to see you hurt, Quinn. But families have their own way of doing things. You know that. I pressed my lips together. And that's exactly why a stranger like Richard Green can see and support me more clearly than the people who share my blood. I ended the call before I said something I'd regret. I couldn't concentrate for the rest of the afternoon, just stared at the Kingswell data analysis dashboard. But oddly, the anger didn't derail me. It made me more certain. That evening, I got a message from Richard. "You're confirmed. I'll schedule the first Kingswell meeting for next week. They're looking forward to hearing from you." I stared at the message for a long time before typing back, "I'm ready." I was sitting at my desk in my small apartment in South Austin when the phone rang again. The screen lit up with Mom and an old photo of the two of us at Galveston Beach when I was 12. In the picture, I was laughing, my hair blown wild by the wind, while my mom had one hand on my shoulder, her eyes tilted toward Alyssa, who stood beside me in a bright yellow floral dress. I hesitated for a moment, then answered, "Hello, Mom." I leaned back in my chair, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Quinn," she said quickly, as if afraid she'd lose courage if she paused, "do you have a minute? I just want to talk for a bit." "It won't take long." I heard dishes clinking, someone laughing in the background. She was probably at Alyssa's house. "I'm working, but I can spare a few minutes. What's going on?" She sighed dramatically. "Alyssa." She cried all night. Rachel said that ever since the party, she's been curled up, saying, "Everyone's only talking about you, about your new job, about how you know Richard Green." She feels overshadowed, even at her own engagement. I tightened my grip on the phone. "Are you calling to blame me for that?" No, I'm not blaming. I want you to understand this is a delicate time. Elisa's been looking forward to this wedding for so long, you know that. She spent the past year planning every detail around this day, and now everyone's attention has shifted to you. I just thought maybe if you could wait until after the wedding before making things so loud. I cut her off, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "I'm not making a scene, Mom. I accepted a job, a professional opportunity. I didn't call the media. I didn't post it on Facebook. I didn't even tell anyone in the family." She hesitated. "But other people are talking. Richard's been telling everyone. People at church are gossiping. I just want everything to stay calm. So, your sister's wedding can be perfect." I closed my eyes, telling myself not to react too quickly, but the hurt crept in like a familiar cut. "I'm not stealing anyone's spotlight, Mom. I'm just living my life. I'm not pushing my way onto Alyssa's stage. But if I do something worth noticing, is that somehow my fault?" She didn't respond right away. I heard something clatter against a table on her end. Finally, she spoke softly, as if trying to keep the peace. "I'm just worried about you girls and your relationship. You understand that, don't you?" I nodded, even though she couldn't see it. "I understand, but Mom, I'm your daughter too. I have feelings. I want to feel proud of myself for once without being treated like a threat." "Fine," she said, her voice turning colder. "I just wanted to remind you to think carefully. Don't let petty things ruin family ties. I hope nothing surprising happens at the wedding." The call ended with a flat goodbye. I set the phone on the table and sat in silence. The room felt still. Afternoon sunlight slipped through the blinds, casting striped shadows on the white wall. I placed a hand on my chest. I wasn't crying, but something caught in my throat. I wasn't taking anything from anyone. I didn't ask for the spotlight. All I wanted was one word of praise, one look of recognition, one hug from my mother that didn't come with a comparison. I used to think that if I were good enough, persistent enough, they'd eventually see me. But it turns out every effort I made was always filtered through the same lens. "Your sister's exhausted. Can you please just step back a little?" I got up from my desk and walked slowly to the sofa, sat down, rested my head on the cushion. The apartment was quiet, except for the steady ticking of the wall clock. I wasn't weak, but the words from my mother, so weightless yet heavy as stone, always shook me. The rational part of me said, "Keep going. But somewhere deep inside, there was still a little girl standing behind a door, peeking through the curtain, just hoping someone would smile proudly at her. I closed my eyes, then exhaled. Tomorrow was another workday, and I wouldn't fall apart over a phone call. But tonight, I'd let myself hurt a little. Just a little. 3 days after the call from my mom, I got a message from Richard. Get ready. I'm introducing you to two of the people I trust most. They don't like flashy talk. Just be yourself. I showed up to the meeting in a simple charcoal gray suit, my hair neatly tied back. The cafe was inside a high-end office complex in North Austin. When I walked in, Richard was already seated with two older men. He waved me over and pointed to the man with silver-rimmed glasses. Quinn, this is Frank Weston, CEO of BitLink Solutions, and this is Daniel Reese, investment advisor at Horizon Strategies. My heart skipped a beat at the name BitLinks. 3 years ago, I had applied for their lead technical coordinator position. After the final interview, I received an email from HR. You have the skill set, but your work style is too analytical and lacks emotional leadership. We're looking for someone who better fits our internal culture. I smiled and shook Frank's hand, hiding the bitter memory. But he stared at me for a moment, then chuckled. I've heard of you before, but now I have a face to match the name. Seems like I missed something interesting a few years back. Daniel was different. His words were sharp as razors, but his eyes were thoughtful. He asked about the strategic model I had proposed to Richard, about integrating internal data streams with behavioral analysis tools. I answered steadily, though my nerves were running wild. These were the kind of people who could change my entire life with a single nod. After the meeting, Richard shook my hand firmly. I'll tell them you're someone they can trust, but the rest is up to how you perform next week. Horizon and BitLinks are planning a 3-year innovation alliance, and they don't hand out trust easily. I left the cafe with my heart pounding, to sit among people with real influence, to be asked real questions instead of getting shallow compliments. It made me feel both thrilled and terrified, but deep inside there was a calm certainty. I was on the right path. That afternoon, as I was halfway through drafting a summary of ideas for Richard, a new email popped into my inbox. Subject: Can't believe this. Sender: Alyssa Dawson. I frowned slightly. We had never exchanged personal emails. I clicked it open. This girl is such a self-righteous robot. What does she know about working with real people? She lives in her own head. And now she's pulling in my future father-in-law to climb the ladder? Disgusting. If Mom hadn't told me to keep the peace, I would have told her to her face already. At the bottom was one short line, like she'd just realized her mistake. Sent to the wrong person. Sorry. I sat frozen, my eyes fixated on the words future father-in-law, my chest tightening. I imagined Alyssa sitting at home, frantically opening her inbox, realizing she'd sent the email to the wrong recipient, then scrambling to patch it with a hollow excuse. But, to me, there was nothing left to explain. I wasn't angry about the words she used. I was used to that. Growing up, Alyssa always called me cold machine, unapproachable, to marry. What shattered me was that she truly believed I was using Richard to get ahead just because he was her fiancé's father. In her eyes, I couldn't possibly just be good. I had to have an angle, had to manipulate, had to cling. I got up from the desk and stepped onto the balcony. The June breeze hit my face, carrying the leftover warmth from the rooftop tiles. All these years, I thought that if I lived decently, worked hard, and stayed quiet, people would eventually see me differently. But Alyssa's email was a mirror down to the bone. In this family, I would always be a walking robot, and the fact that I was finally being recognized was seen as a threat. My phone buzzed, a message from Richard. Frank wants to meet you one-on-one. He said there's something about you that's changed how he recruits. I read the message, then sat down slowly, gripping the phone in my hand. Should I reply to Alyssa? Should I tell her I never needed Richard to rise, that everything I have is from over a decade of relentless work? Or should I stay silent and let my success speak for me? I sat by the window of a familiar cafe in downtown Austin, a half-finished cappuccino going cold in my hand, my mind spinning. I hadn't slept much in days. Since Elisa's email, I hadn't responded. I had typed and deleted over and over, then left it blank. Melissa, my best friend since college, had just sat down across from me, pulling off her scarf and eyeing me with concern. "You okay?" she asked softly, opening her laptop. I shook my head and let out a long breath. She thinks I'm using Richard to climb, that everything I've achieved isn't real, that it's all from some connection. I gave a dry laugh, eyes drifting toward the street. It's ridiculous. For 20 years, I stood in the background so they could shine. Now that it's my turn, they can't take it. Melissa looked at me for a moment, then said in a steady, low voice, "It's not your fault when people hate the light you give off, just because they're standing in the dark. No one has the right to make you feel guilty for stepping out of the box they once locked you in." I didn't respond right away. That sentence felt like the final latch holding together the mess of thoughts spiraling in my mind. I had tried to be accommodating, tried to keep the peace, tried not to embarrass anyone in the family or become the reason for any tension. But while they demanded I stay quiet and know my place, not once did they ask how I felt. That night, I opened my email. The wedding invitation subject line was still sitting there, unread. I clicked reply. I typed simply but clearly, "Dear Alyssa and Brian, thank you for the invitation. However, I won't be attending the wedding. I've been invited to be the keynote speaker at TechRise's Innovation Summit in New York. It's an important opportunity for me, and I'm choosing to be where I belong. Wishing you both a warm and joyful celebration. Quinn." I read it over a few times, then hit send. No bitterness, no blame, just a choice. 3 days later, I walked into the lobby of the Hilton Midtown, surrounded by hundreds of conference attendees. On the backdrop behind the main stage, my name was printed in bold letters next to the phrase "Strategic Thinkers of Tomorrow." I didn't tell my mother. I didn't say anything to extended family. I didn't post online. I didn't need a performance. I was here for me. Because I was no longer willing to live someone else's life just to be called sweet, easygoing, or the good older sister. I entered the speaker lounge. Frank was already there, flipping through papers. When he saw me, he gave a satisfied nod. "Don't let the crowd distract you," he said. "They're here because of what you've consistently built, not because of anyone standing behind you." I nodded, thanking him with my eyes. Right on time, I stepped onto the stage. Under the lights, I saw hundreds of faces waiting. No one here knew my family story. No one cared how I'd once been compared, dismissed, or labeled as the logical one or the quiet sister. Here, I was simply someone with something to say, and people were listening. I began, my voice low, steady, and firm. "My name is Quinn Dawson. I'm from Austin, Texas. I grew up in a family that believed there was only one kind of success worth celebrating, the kind that's loud, praised, and put on display. I was different. I grew up in labs, in university libraries, and behind computer keyboards. No one taught me how to draw attention, but I learned how to create real value." I saw a few people nod gently, maybe they understood. "I'm not here to tell a fairy tale. I'm here because I believe the overlooked, the underestimated, the forgotten are often the ones holding the power to shift the game." The talk lasted nearly 20 minutes. When I finished, the entire hall stood and applauded. I bowed in gratitude. In that moment, I didn't think of my mother's cold eyes or Elisa's sharp words. I thought only of what Melissa once said. Words that struck so deep, they stayed buried in my chest. Some people can't stand the light, not because the light is wrong, but because they've never dared to step out of their own shadow. And me, after all these years, I had finally stepped out. The night before the wedding, the Fairmont Hotel in Dallas was adorned in white flowers and flickering candles, blanketing the grand hall in elegance. I wasn't there, but a video, sent to me by an old industry friend who happened to be a guest of one of Richard's business partners, landed in my inbox later. The sender meant it as a playful update, not realizing they had captured a moment that would quietly shake the foundation of my entire family. The evening unfolded like most rehearsal dinners: laughter, clinking glasses, well-rehearsed toasts. But when Richard Green stood up, his voice low yet clear through the microphone, the room seemed to still. "Before we begin the gift exchange for the happy couple," he said, "I'd like to share a few personal words. I don't have a biological daughter, but if I had to choose one woman from the next generation to trust and work alongside in critical moments, it would be Quinn Dawson." He paused, glancing toward the table where my mother, father, and Elisa sat, pressed together like a single, polished unit. I met Quinn during what many would call a no-win situation. The software firm Tech Trust was on the verge of shutting down. 6 weeks, ladies and gentlemen, he said, holding up 6 fingers. In 6 weeks, she not only rebuilt the product roadmap, but also brought 2 major investors back to the table. That company has now regained nearly 50% of its value just in the first quarter. The entire hall fell silent. A few scattered claps echoed, uncertain how to react. The name Quinn Dawson hadn't appeared anywhere on the evening's speaker list. Richard continued with calm conviction, "I'm proud to call her part of my new family. And I believe if Brian learns even a fraction of her responsibility, resilience, and kindness from his future sister-in-law, then this marriage will be stronger than any vow written on paper." Alyssa's face, frozen in the video, hardened. My mother leaned in to whisper something to her, and just seconds later, Alyssa stood up and moved quickly toward the mic. Her voice trembled as she began, "Thank you, Uncle Richard, that was very touching." She glanced around, forcing a smile. "Quinn is a very smart person. Of course, everyone knows she's someone who always puts work first. And sometimes she gets so focused, she might forget the vibe in the room." A few awkward coughs echoed. No one laughed, no one clapped. She kept going, clearly unraveling. "But anyway, tomorrow's about love, and let's just get back to that, okay?" A heavy pause hung in the air as Alyssa exhaled, grabbed her dress, and turned away from the stage. The camera followed her to the ballroom doors, where she wiped tears from her cheeks and was quietly led out by my mother. The person who sent the video included a note: "You didn't have to do anything. The light was strong enough to show everything." I watched the clip again and again in silence. I didn't feel triumphant. There was only a deep lump in my throat, as if years of being dismissed, belittled, and forgotten had finally been laid bare in front of the world without me having to utter a single word. Richard didn't speak up for me to get revenge. He did it because he saw value and wasn't afraid to name it. And Alyssa, standing before a full room, with no one interrupting, no one stealing the mic, and no one stopping her from shining, could not hide the discomfort of someone used to being praised, now facing the truth that being seen wasn't hers alone anymore. I closed the video, shut my laptop, and stood. Night in New York was quiet. Light snow drifted past the window. I walked to the bed, feeling no regret about missing the ceremony. Not because I needed to be on that stage, but because I had chosen the right place, to never bow my head again. That morning, as the church bells rang in Dallas to welcome my sister's wedding day, I was standing behind the curtain at the New York Convention Center, wearing a pale gray blazer dress, remote clicker in hand, gazing at the warm golden lights shining down on the stage. In front of me was a sea of faces: product directors, strategy consultants, tech founders, and investment advisors, people I once never imagined I'd have a chance to speak with, let alone inspire. "Thank you all for listening," I said softly, ending my speech with a simple note of gratitude and standing still for a brief moment before the applause broke out, strong and steady, like waves. There were no flowers, no veil, no choir, but in that moment, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. The meet and greet after the speech took place in an open space on the second floor of the convention center. Amid the soft hum of conversations, I stepped toward a quiet corner by the window and pulled out my phone. 12 unread messages. All from the same group of people I had spent years seeking validation from and never received it. A message from Mom, have you had breakfast? One from Dad, how did the talk go? But the one that stood out came from Alyssa. No long-winded lines, no excuses, no poetry. I hate you, but I wish I had the courage to live like you. I sank into the chair. That message made my chest tighten, but not out of anger. It was the weight of raw truth. For years, I saw Alyssa as the spoiled one, the selfish one. I never imagined my younger sister could carry that kind of inner conflict. Maybe it was the expectations from Mom, from the town, from every watching eye that forced her to live as a perfect, suffocating version of herself. Less than 10 minutes later, Mom called. I hesitated for a few seconds, then answered. Her voice wasn't sharp, nor was it overly sweet like in the past. It was slow, slightly hoarse, like she hadn't slept. Where are you? New York. I just finished the keynote. There was a long pause. I thought she might switch to asking about Elisa or the wedding. But what she said next stopped me cold. Could you send me the video of your speech from last night? I didn't respond right away. My hand tightened around the phone, trying not to cry. You want to see it? Yes, she answered, her voice light as air. I just want to understand why someone like Richard Green would stand in front of all those people and say those things about you. I opened the folder where I had saved the video my friend sent a few days earlier. Before hitting send, I looked once more at the frame. Me, under soft lights, speaking about the resilience of strategy, belief in things not yet seen, and the value of perseverance. I sent the video by email with a simple note, if you really want to hear it, here it is. Not long after, Mom left a voice message. I didn't play it right away. I let it sit. Because inside me, for the first time in years, there was a strange kind of stillness. I didn't feel hurt or angry or even happy, just a wide open space where I was no longer trapped between the desire to be loved and the need to be myself. In the middle of the busy conference space, I looked up through the large glass window. Light snow fell on the rooftops of towering buildings. A New York that once felt foreign now felt like a gentle home for those who had once been overlooked. I didn't know if my relationship with my family would change after today, but I knew that whether they understood me or not, accepted me or not, I would no longer shrink myself. Sometimes listening doesn't begin with agreement. Sometimes it begins when someone finally goes quiet and lets you speak. 6 months after the conference in New York, I officially placed the first nameplate outside a small office in downtown Austin. Dawson & Co., Strategic Business Development Consulting. The office was just about 700 square feet. White walls, old wooden floors, but every inch of it had been handpicked and assembled by me. From the walnut desk to the deep blue fabric chair by the window, we started with 3 clients, a family-owned bakery on the verge of closing, a group of young engineers who just received funding, and a single mom opening a laundromat after her office job. My first 2 team members, Lena, who had been an analyst assistant at Tech Trust, and Marco, a freelance legal advisor. We worked side by side in the only meeting room that doubled as our main office. I didn't dream of becoming a famous CEO or making magazine covers. I just wanted to build a space where small businesses, those the market called too weak to survive, had someone reaching out a real hand to steady them. Each morning, I brewed 2 pots of coffee for the team, played soft music, and started the day with the same question. What knot are we untying today? We didn't work miracles, but through every meeting, every analysis, every detailed plan, I saw people who once walked in with their heads down leave, standing tall again. One Friday afternoon, I was finishing the last report of the day when my phone buzzed. It was Mom. Do you have a minute? Her voice wasn't cold, nor was it rushed. I'm still at the office. What's going on? Your dad and I are going to Uncle Henry's event tomorrow. He asked for some consultant referrals. I mentioned your company. I paused, looking at the last light of day streaming through the blinds. What did you say? I asked quietly. She hesitated for a moment. I said, my daughter, Quinn, a business consultant. She started her own firm in Austin. It's very well run. I didn't respond right away. Something caught in my throat. Not because of the words, but because of how she said them. Without hesitation, without shame, without avoiding the topic like she used to. I'd like you to send me a few short profiles in case anyone asks, she continued, as if afraid I'd refuse. I'll send them now, I replied softly. After the call, I stood and walked to the large mirror leaning against the wall. The woman staring back at me was no longer the girl who used to sit silently at family dinners, afraid to speak up for fear of being too much. She was a grown woman who no longer needed applause to know she was on the right path. A week later, I traveled to Houston to attend a local business seminar. As I walked into the reception area, I suddenly heard someone call my name from behind. Quinn? Are you Quinn Dawson? I turned. A middle-aged man wearing a name tag that read Gregory Tran, owner, G-Tech's appliance shop, approached to shake my hand. I heard your mom talking about your company at the party last week. Never seen her talk about anyone with such pride in her eyes. I laughed and said lightly, sounds like I might need to hire her as my head of communications. He chuckled at that. As night fell on the highway from Houston back to Austin, I sat in the back seat, eyes following the stream of passing lights. In my mind, I saw Elisa in her wedding dress, Brian smiling beside her, and my mother standing among old acquaintances, introducing me without having to lower her head in apology. I didn't need them to completely change. I just needed to know I no longer had to ask for permission to be myself. And in that moment, I smiled, not because I was finally called by the right name, but because I had learned to live fully without waiting for anyone to grant me that right. Have you ever felt like you needed permission just to live up to your potential? Have you ever been pushed to the sidelines just because people got used to your silence? My story isn't an accusation, it's not a declaration of war. It's simply the journey of a woman who was once treated as supporting cast, but learned to stand tall, walk forward, and write her own leading role. If you've ever felt overlooked or had to carry the weight of family expectations just to stay afloat, share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your story, because I believe we all deserve that moment when we finally stand up for ourselves. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to discover more everyday but deeply personal stories about family, sacrifice, silent misunderstandings, and the journey to reclaim our true worth in a world full of expectations and comparisons.